This is the first of a series of conversations that I will have the opportunity to host on behalf of Columbus State TV. In the coming weeks, we will talk with campus leaders, faculty members, alumni, students, and interesting people from the greater Columbus, Georgia community. Our goal is to better inform our viewers as to what is happening that affects them and what we do in the College of Education and Health Professions. Our first guest is an old friend, a longtime friend anyway, who serves as Columbus State University Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. Dr. Hackett was my student in the late 70s and early 80s. Mm-hmm. The first part of today's conversation will be a bit personal, introducing Dr. Hackett to members of the faculty who know him perhaps as a name, a position, a face, oftentimes a smiling face, I might say, but not a whole lot more. So later on we'll shift to issues affecting the Columbus State at large, or more specifically the College of Ed and Health Professions. Tom, Dr. Hackett, you enrolled at Columbus College in 1972, and you went to high school, I think,
Right across the highway at Hardaway High School.
At Hardaway High School, you were a Hawk, and that was a pretty new school in that time, was it not?
It I think, had been in existence about 8 years. So
right,
yeah, it was brand new.
And Muskogee County Schools desegregated, I think, during your senior year. And that was right. The time I arrived on campus as an assistant professor of education. What are your recollections of the desegregation of Muskogee County schools?
That's thinking back to that time. My sophomore year, that was the year before desegregation, and actually it was our junior year when Hardaway was engaged in the desegregation, and it was really interesting because a lot of my friends who were at Hardaway, who lived in a neighborhood adjacent to mine, were transported to different schools. So it was. And tell
more about that, because I recall very well the transportation, which was the heated issue, really, wasn't it?
Right, and I think the idea relative to that was that each Muskogee County school, as I remember it, the high schools, because that's where I was attending, was going to reflect the demographic makeup of the community.
Right.
So what happened was different neighborhoods were zoned to attend different schools to achieve that balance, which I think was part of the Muskogee County consent decree back during that era.
But basically you lived in the assignment area, or whatever you call it.
I lived in the Hardaway assignment area as a sophomore, and I was one of the students. Our immediate neighborhood remained at Hardaway.
Sort of intact, I guess you would say.
Yes,
yeah.
But then neighborhoods not very far away, a number of those students were bused at that time to Carver High School, the old Carver High School.
Right,
so,
right.
So a lot of my
friends.
But
how was it for you as a kid?
Well, you know, really, actually the most...
I mean, I'm assuming that you did not... I shouldn't assume anything.
Yeah.
But you grew up in a mixed racial community. You were a white kid.
Yeah.
Went to church here, did this, that,
well,
that,
really,
there, but you probably didn't hang out with black kids very much before then.
Well, actually, we grew up in the military, so we traveled around a good bit, and for a large part of my life, I was in private Catholic schools, and they were integrated.
Well, sure.
So,
I think the military has kind of set the pace for the rest of the culture on that matter.
So actually, the most disruptive experience for me was moving from that parochial school environment, which I'd been in since third grade, into a public school as a sophomore. That was really eye-opening. And then the fact that a year later, the Muskogee County went through desegregation, that really was not as impactful on me personally, because I had been in schools that were integrated schools before.
And where else had you lived as a child growing up in a military family?
Well, before we moved to Columbus, we had lived in Houston, Texas, and I attended a parochial school out there. And for previous to that, my dad had been at Benning, but we'd even lived in South America. We'd lived out in California. We'd lived in Kansas. So we'd been all over. Little known event in my life is actually where I was born. I was born in New York. I know I really don't sound like it.
No, no, you don't exactly.
But yeah, I was born in New York, as was my brother. My dad was teaching in the military intelligence school at Fort Slocum.
Now, that's interesting. Now, your father became a faculty member here at Columbus State, and I think he was the Latin and Greek professor and English as well, perhaps? Or?
Yeah, that's an interesting story, really, because Dad was getting ready.
And he has the same name, right?
Yeah.
Or he was
Paul Thomas
we
Hackett,
knew him as Paul,
right?
And we know you as Tom,
right?
But are you a junior?
I'm a junior.
Okay,
yeah.
There you go.
So Dad was getting ready to retire from the military. He was professor of military science at the University of Houston. And we had property in Savannah where he was planning on moving. And I think his idea was initially that he would teach maybe high school English in Savannah. But when he came to Columbus on maneuvers with his cadets from the University of Houston, my mother asked him to check in at the college.
Oh, wow.
And that's when he met Jack Brown, who was the chair of the English department at that time.
Right. Well, and he was a character, but I guess we don't need to go there too much right now.
And Jack hired my dad, and my dad came in during the first president's tenure, Thomas Whitley, and then 2 years later, I was a student at Columbus College in English.
So your father was here probably a year earlier than I, since I started in 71.
Right.
And 1970 was the year we awarded our first baccalaureate degrees, and an awful lot of faculty were coming aboard at that time. And
right.
So your dad was part of that.
He was part of that movement,
right.
That's right.
All right. Well, why did you come to Columbus College rather than Auburn or some other place?
You know, I really don't think I was that intentional about the whole college experience, but Columbus College was here. I loved to read. I was interested in English, and my dad was a member at that time of the Language and Humanities Department.
Right.
So I guess in the back of my mind, I was sort of following in his footsteps. I was going to come in and be an English teacher,
right.
or at least an English student. So
I was going to ask you how your parents shaped who you are. You want to add something to that? You might have been an English major because your dad.
I don't.
You know,
I don't think there's any question about that. My dad was and Mom is still they were voracious readers. My dad was a very interested in promoting what he called the Renaissance human.
Yes, I've heard you refer to that previously.
And I think that did have a great deal of effect on me. It was interesting, though, that when I came here in the middle of the 70s, which were for Columbus, the 70s were Columbus's 60s. So, you know, there was the counterculture movement and the rock and roll and all that was going on.
And an awful lot of guys coming out of the military and going to school here at Columbus State, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, it's interesting, we were talking about my dad. He was a big favorite with the vets. Having been a vet, but it was fun to see my dad, who had engaged in his initial foray into growing sideburns. That was about it. And then some of the vets, of course, had long hair and that kind of thing, but they'd wander around campus together.
When I recall your father, I think of him as sort of having a fairly quiet person in a way, but a very subtly witty person. Does that ring a bell with you, or is that just a vague thing that I didn't know him well, goodness knows, but
yeah, he was.
I mean, he was clearly older, and I wasn't, and and he was wiser, and I wasn't, and I was ambitious, and he seemed to be pleased with where he was anyway. But I had a number of students who would be taking his classes and sought them out.
Yeah, I think the most characteristic quality my dad had, he was a real people person. He loved people, and he loved to hear about where they were. So I think his students really got that about him. They liked him because he was interested in hearing where they were, that kind of thing.
So where did you meet your future wife?
Here.
Oh, here.
Yeah, she and I met up in the Davidson Center.
Oh,
actually.
wow.
Yeah. So.
And anything you want to tell me about that?
Well,
love at first sight.
it actually.
You've described yourself previously as, oh, I don't know, a bit of a, I don't know, I won't say tough guy. I guess that's not it. But you weren't ready to just fit in and do exactly what you were told all the time.
No, I probably was more on the rebellious side. But by the time I met Janie, I think really I had settled down a good bit, and I had actually briefly, for a year or so, left college and worked out in the. I was worked in landscaping, that kind of thing. So when I came back to college, I was. Let's say a lot more focused, because I had a little life experience, and I was a lot more intentional about what I wanted to do.
Did you live at home when you were a student, or did you?
Yes
and no?
Yes and no. Yeah, for a while I had an apartment, and then toward the end, yeah, I lived at home, and I worked at the medical center at night. And so the last 3 years of college, I worked at the Columbus Medical Center.
And you graduated what, in '77?
That's right.
Right. Okay. And you took your first education course in '79.
That's right.
And you student taught, you know, I think you enrolled in the, I'm going to say winter of '79. In the following fall, you were student teaching.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And I still remember, actually, when I graduated from Columbus College at that time, I graduated in the middle of a recession, a lot like the most recent one. And it was really tough to find any kind of job that you'd think was a English major type job. So when
that's still true, you know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I think my original idea was to that I was like so many of my classmates, we were going to write a great novel or something like that. But I ended up I was a vendor in Atlanta, and I had I was working up there for a while, and I really I didn't really like the work that much.
What were you vending?
Actually, cigarettes.
Wow!
I was filling cigarette machines.
Shame.
And I know it. I know now that's so politically incorrect, but I filled cigarette machines and candy machines. So I worked for an outfit in Atlanta.
You probably never became buds with Paula Dean, though. Not quite that not PC.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Poor Paula, and I don't want to weigh in on that too much, but. You know, that's sort of where we are. Let's backtrack a little bit. You mentioned Thomas Whitley, and I guess I'm shifting topic rather in a major way here a little bit. But I recall Dr. Whitley, our first president, saying long about 75 that he anticipated that we would enroll 10,000 students by 1980. And that sounded like a swell idea at the time, and everybody was all for it, I'm sure. At which point we went through, it seemed to me, in my role as a department chair before long, 13 straight years of declining enrollment. 13 straight years. And you know, at that point, if you lost a faculty member, you just closed ranks and marched on, because there were very little opportunity to fill positions and so forth. Let's talk about enrollment now. I think I've heard you say before that enrollment is flat, and I don't know what are the prospects for fall. I noticed that, of course, I would normally teach, and have taught a number of years. It's made every time it's been offered, and right now I have no students enrolled for my upcoming class this fall. Well, what the heck's going on? That's a graduate class. What's going on?
It's hard to know about the graduate studies, and it could be a couple of things. Sometimes graduate programs, you have a situation where you have a number of students who need the degree, and then you sort of fish that pool, and then for a while,
for sure,
it cycles out, and then it cycles back around. I think I've heard some discussion in some of the other graduate programs about a similar thing. Overall, I think we will see enrollment begin to increase again. And one thing about graduate programs is they have, over the last 4 years, significantly increased, about 10%.
Yeah.
So there has been a trend up, so it could be that the trend is flattening out.
When I want to mutter something under my breath about enrollment, I say, well, it's some of those online programs that are sapping, you might say, or taking people away from our face-to-face classes and programs. And for sure, that's there's a bit of inevitability in all of that. At the same time, I can regret it. Am I crazy to mutter along those lines?
Well, I think the environment is a lot more competitive because of those kinds of things.
Both competitive within Columbus State University programs, and then across and from elsewhere in the university system, and I guess even out of state, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole technology thing is disruptive, and it does create some of those situations.
Right.
At the same time, my thought, and this is my personal thought, but I think that although online's going to continue to grow, online education, I think a lot of the time online education hits a brand new market, so that those students, and I'd be one of those students who really didn't like going online. I would rather be in a face-to-face class.
I think I've read in the New York Times and elsewhere that especially students who are, let's say, underprepared for higher education to begin with, hundreds may enroll in a course.
Yeah.
It may be adequately staffed and taught, but a very minimal percentage of those people actually finish that course, and so that's sort of the downside. Where I think if you, I was interviewing the first graduate of the Master of Science in Nursing program the other day, and she really took to the online environment. She was with it, and she was the first Columbus State student to finish that program. And clearly, when you are motivated and know which end and know your technology reasonably well, it can be really good.
Yep.
And so at the same time, I know that we often are teaching and admitting underprepared students here who need more the hands-on approach, it seems to me.
Right.
And that may be true among graduate students too, especially if they've been out of school for a while. Yeah.
Well, I think that's right. I think the online thing will continue to develop in much the same way. A few years ago it was courses on VCR, and then before that it was correspondence courses.
Sure. Yeah.
The latest thing, of course, is the idea of the MOOC.
Yes.
And that's supposed to transform everything, but and it may, but I always think that in terms of the MOOC, we've always had MOOCs, but we called them books, and you could go to Barnes & Noble and buy a book, and for a lot less money than you can take a college course.
Sure. I recently attended my 50th reunion at the University of Virginia. And 18 months ago, the University of Virginia president, Teresa Sullivan, was under fire from a number of highly influential alumni who, I think, among other things, felt as if she wasn't, the University of Virginia was not moving quickly enough toward an array of online offerings. And she wanted to do a more step-by-step approach, which, other alumni and students and faculty sort of rose up in arms, not literally, but it seemed that way, and restored her to her position. And I have really respected the kind of careful movement in the direction of online teaching that she promoted, or at least stood behind.
Yep.
Let's go back to, here we are talking trends and policies and making predictions. Let's go back. All of a sudden, you're a classroom teacher. You said at the high school level. Where did you begin teaching?
Central High.
At Central High. Wow. Yeah. And it was in the old building, of course.
Right. What is now the intermediate school.
Right. Okay. And you taught. Who'd you teach?
Well, I taught high school juniors. I taught initially. I taught English, so I taught English all day to junior.
And you were enrolled here rather soon in a Master of Education program in Ed Leadership. Well, we call it now. It was Ed Admin then, I think.
Yeah. Originally, I was intending to get my master's in secondary English, and I really did not have administrative aspirations. I really wanted to teach English, but it was, I was in a situation where we had one kid come along, then another kid come along.
And kids do that, don't they?
Yeah, and really, since I wasn't an athlete and didn't play sports, there wasn't anything I could coach to make a little extra money.
Right.
So I did ultimately get into the administrative side. And
I often tell people to go to their interview with a whistle around their neck and introduce themselves as Coach Hackett.
Yeah, right.
But you didn't want to be Coach Hackett.
Well, I think I would have if I had anything to coach, and in fact, I did coach drama, but there wasn't at that time. There wasn't any money in coaching drama. You just did it out of the because you loved doing it. You know. So.
And so, how many years were you doing that?
I taught English for 6 years.
6 years, yeah. And then we sort of moved on with our lives and our babies and so forth. And then next time I recall seeing you was, I think you were assistant principal at South Girard.
That's right.
Yeah. And you graciously showed me around, and you seemed to be rather enthusiastic about what was going on. And I don't remember a great deal about that, but it was, but before, and then you were in Alexander City.
Right.
What's that like? What, 55 miles up the road?
Right, exactly. And it's
toward Birmingham.
About halfway to Birmingham, really, from here.
Okay.
And I became an elementary school principal, a 5th and 6th grade school.
Okay.
And that was really, really a lot of fun. And
it didn't give you any gray hair, I can tell.
No, it was, and I worked with really, really good faculty, and I followed I was the second principal of that school.
Yeah.
So I followed somebody who'd been there for, I don't know, 20 years. And then my next principalship was the same kind of situation. I went to the Alex City Middle School, and I followed Jerry Lawrence there, and he'd been there 25 years. So, I followed two legends, and that was really sort of an interesting situation to be in.
And you became superintendent of Phoenix City Schools. When was that?
I became superintendent, I guess it was in 2000.
Okay.
Had
you followed a long time? Did you move into a position?
I was there. I was in Phoenix City as the chief of operations, and they called it the administrative assistant for ancillary services. Since no one knows what that is, it's really
do whatever had to be done. Maybe
the maintenance building. We were in a real building phase. A lot of our buildings were older, and we were building new schools, roofing schools. So I had to get up to speed on that really quickly.
Yeah. Right. Well, I recall seeing you on the local television, and I said, "Oh, there's Tom Hackett. He's talking about whatever is going on, and he's and so I know our viewers are interested, very interested in this, as well as other things in addition. Well, let's take a short break here, and we'll be back and continue our conversation, taking a look at some of the things that are going on, or that we hope will be going on campus and in the College of Education and Health Professions. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Tom Hackett, who is the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Columbus State University. Let me ask us kind of a basic question, maybe a little naive. What's a provost?
That's the question I asked when I first became interim provost, really, because really it depends on I think the situation an institution finds itself in.
That's not like the assistant for ancillary affairs,
it's very much like that. It really, for the way it plays out at Columbus State is really, I focus mostly on academic programs, and right now that involves we're engaged in an effort to ramp up student completion
Indeed.
And matriculation, that kind of thing. Also, really, I see the role as a faculty role. So I came here to be a faculty member. I'm very interested in the academic mission of the institution, and I think that's our primary mission, really. So we have some emphasis on research now. I think that's really good. I like to do research, and so I try to do the things that support that advancing the academic mission, research mission of the institution.
And is a provost more likely to be working on that end of things as opposed to a vice president for academic affairs? I mean, draw a line between the two for me if you can, and if you can't, that's really okay too.
There's a large spillover effect, really, because academics ties into everything. Since the mission of the institution is to teach, is to do research, then everything we do supports that mission. So okay. I'm involved a lot in all the areas of the institution.
And so you work closely with the deans,
yes.
and among them Dean Barbara
right.
C. Buckner of the College
right.
of Education mm-hmm. and Health Professions. How do you and she get along? I mean, I know this is not going to be an expose. You helped. I would assume she reports to you, does she not?
Yes.
Okay, and, so that's pretty important.
I'm very excited that Barbara chose to come here. She brings a lot of tools to the table and a lot of experience.
Beginning her third year now.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Does time fly or what?
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. Well, and you know, I've been able to work with 3 College of Education and College of Education health profession deans. You know, I got to work with Thomas Harrison rather,
right.
and I was able to work with David Rock. He came in after Thomas retired, and so Barbara, I think, is taking us in new directions.
Sure. And it was with David Rock. It was you and he and President Meskin that were kind of the point guys, we'll say, in moving toward the approval of the doctoral program here, which is certainly a major step.
I think that's absolutely right. I think certainly David Cumming, he was very, very supportive, in fact, really out front on the doctoral thing. Now, the initiative was begun with Thomas Harrison and my department chair, Tom Ford, mm-hmm. who sort of allowed me to get going on that. And I think in the late 90s, Thomas Harrison had attempted to get a proposal for a doctoral program in ed leadership through the regents. And I think the tipping point really was Tim Meskin was able to really make the case at the state level for that doctoral program.
He's a pretty strong case maker, I would say.
Yeah,
among other things.
And I think his experience, having been a dean in Atlanta, he knew the landscape. He knew a lot of the individuals up there, and he's been able to sort of open doors at the university system offices. So mm-hmm. I think we're really present in a way that maybe 2 or 3 years ago we weren't.
Right.
So.
And I see we awarded 2 doctoral degrees this past May.
Right.
And that's great.
Yes, and so that's.
And I realized that Justin Finney, I believe, was an earlier awardee, but because Justin had transferred in a number of credits from a rival institution or,
right.
or a
right.
brother-sister institution.
One of our
the ones who went all the way through here are the ones that really have gotten my attention.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there have been 3 of those that have gone all the way through here,
uh-huh.
and they're the members of the original cohort.
As I believe that
mm-hmm.
the new Muskogee County Teacher of the Year, Kim
mm-hmm.
Lester,
yes.
is involved and rather close to finishing a doctoral program
right.
here.
She's writing her dissertation.
In fact, I want to get her on our program here.
Oh, she'd be great.
Yeah, well, I think I taught her.
Yeah.
I ought to remember if I had done that. Well, in the College of Ed and Health Professions, innovation mm-hmm. It has been identified as one of our core values,
right.
along with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested in your thoughts. In fact, we're even going to have a new magazine called Innovation.
Great.
But what are 1 or 2 innovations at Columbus State please you at this point, and which do you anticipate in the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, I will tell you this. I was at a presentation over in the Cunningham Center, and the presenter was referencing neurological underpinnings to teaching and learning. And it just so happens she's one of the College of Education Health Professions doctoral students. So there are some really early adopters like you and Dee Greer who have pushed that whole idea. I think that's an innovation that it's very timely. I think as you guys explore more that nexus between how the brain actually grows and how that plays out in learning activities, I think that'll be huge, and has tremendous promise. You know,
and do you see this as something that we can see among history professors and criminal justice and art professors and educator faculty, or?
Well, I really do, and here's, I mean, the whole idea is that the things we do in class or away from class, the activities we plan, actually result in physiological change.
Sure,
that's what happens.
they do.
And there's a really interesting book written recently about by a journalist who decided to learn to play the guitar later in life. He's in his 40s. Now, to me, that's still pretty young, but to him, that was later in life. But he was really cognizant of the fact that he had to affect physiological change in the brain in order to learn these new skills.
Do you recall what's the title?
I can't remember.
I'm fishing for a title here myself. I had my students reading a book. At least I know the title. If not, in fact, this is funny. It's the fact that I can't remember something, because the book is Moonwalking with Einstein: How to Remember Absolutely Everything.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And you know, it was I kind of. In some of my classes, people have a choice as to what they're going to read. And so about a fourth of the class opted for this particular book. And it was very interesting on the author of that book, whose name, who knows, but he decided to enter one of these sort of national competitions on memorizing. It might be the order of cards in a deck of cards, or it might be random numbers. You know, and they have international competitions along this line. And it was very interesting. On the other hand, the more perceptive students, I would say, ended up posing the question, but okay, you can do that, but why? Is that really what we want to do? Certainly there are times when remembering a sequence of one thing or another is excellent, but not always, you know.
Right.
So, so we're moving toward what I'm going to call a more brain-based pedagogy, perhaps, and that's great. I'm for it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
What other innovation do you see that is either in place or about to be?
Well, I think you talking about university-wide?
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing we're seeing that there's a tremendous emphasis on research. Certainly at the graduate level there has been, but there is also now a tremendous emphasis on undergraduate research. And with the idea that is a really viable learning activity when a student goes in and applies those things, like as you were talking about, the memorization aspect of it, goes in and applies that and really creates new knowledge out of research base. See, really, those will be the ideas of the future, and thus the currency of the future. So I think we're right there. I think the time is right for this, I guess, region. That's what it needs from a university. It needs thinkers, researchers, folks who can come in and create new knowledge, so that we can continue to grow. To put a workforce development spin on it, so we can continue to grow the economy locally and feed everybody. Sort of goes to that metaphor that Columbus State is sort of the garden that feeds the region, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, sort of cool.
Yeah.
Thought.
Right. Uptown, downtown Columbus, it's been wonderfully revitalized by the move of numerous Columbus State departments and such to the River Park campus. Is that what we call it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good name for it.
Yeah.
Where do we stand? I know it's beyond the rumors stage. It seems as if chunks of, if not all, of the College of Ed and health professions may well relocate in the next 48 or what, 24 months, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen pretty soon. Now that I can tell you where the project is. That there's presently being an environmental impact study done around the original printing presses in the Ledger building.
Okay.
Whereas that's the proposed site. But so that would. I think that's certainly going to be a part of an overall plan. But there's some other exciting things that are on tap too. I think first, in addition to Lenore Hall, a laboratory addition.
Great.
An addition to the Center for Commerce and Technology. They have some great plans for some ideas relative to the really cool kinds of pedagogical activities for business.
Okay.
And then there'll be a real revitalization of what we think of as main campus.
Right, and I understand we've come up with some good money from the state for remodeling, or whatever we call it, redoing Howard Hall. Or?
That's the first phase. I think again of my dad, whose office was in a wooden carrel in Howard Hall, one of the classrooms.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see that happen within a year. We'll see the ground broken on that. But then,
and is Howard Hall going to be utilized during all this time, or is it going to be?
We're going to have to work around that.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's going to be out of place. So it'll be disruptive to we'll have to figure out a way to adjust schedules so we can still teach classes.
All right.
But one of the most exciting projects, I think, the university is in the process of selling one of its property holdings, Courtyard 1, which is a dorm property.
Right.
And we'll lease that property for dorms temporarily, but I think we'll see in the not too distant future a brand new state-of-the-art dorm facility on main campus. I think that'll be transformative for main campus, along with some of the other renovations and also the growth of the Lenore Hall and sort of that in the campus as a research park. That would really, I think, do a lot for undergraduate life, and also to grow the science technology fields on campus. So there's some pretty interesting things happening in terms of main campus, and I'm really excited for this side of town. I love the River Park campus. I think it's done so much for the uptown that they call now. We called it downtown.
I can't keep
uptown.
Up with
whatever,
what we call it, right?
But I think the main campus we'll see a transformation in how it looks, how it feels, and how it appeals to students.
Right. Let's say you're out of state. You're talking with people who have never been in Georgia even, and you're socializing over a cup of coffee. What do you tell them about Columbus, Georgia?
I tell folks that Columbus, Georgia is a community where there was tremendous visionary leadership and enabled us, unlike many southern towns, to make that transformation out of textile manufacturing to an entirely different economy. And as I talk about that, I also talk about this institution, which has made that transformation.
We're the garden.
Yeah, we're the garden.
Or maybe I need a different metaphor this time.
I think it's
maybe we're the brain.
We're the garden, but we're also growing new things to feed a new community. So it's a really exciting time to be on campus in any kind of role.
And to be in Columbus.
Yeah, and to be in Columbus. So I think, of course, we chose, my family and I, we chose to come here and locate, and then I really wanted to come work at Columbus State University because I was just so excited about the energy here back in around 2004.
It's funny, and you came aboard first, what year? 04?
04, right.
I remember talking with you and welcoming you as others did. And you seemed very excited to be teaching.
I really was.
And that's nice. That's real nice.
Yeah.
Do you tell people about the whitewater rafting opportunity we have here?
You know,
I want to ask, have you been on a raft just yet?
I haven't, but I'm waiting because the president is scheduled a team building exercise for his staff.
I bet he has.
So that's he's really, he loves the whitewater. He's really excited about it. So I think we have a pool on who's going out of the raft first as we go through.
So we're going to go. I can't wait to.
It'll be in July. So I think it'll be fun.
Well, I'm not a, goodness knows I'm not a coward, but as a guy with some very basic shoulder issues, I think I got to stay away from that. And, so I will, but I want to be alongside and cheer you guys along. Perhaps
you really need to be there for that one. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, that will be exciting.
Yeah.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, let's see. I really wanted to ask you about that. What have you read interesting of late?
I'm reading a really interesting book now, and it's one that's not, I read a lot for work, you know, about different things.
Yeah,
but this is just I'm reading for fun, and I'm reading it. It postulates that even in this new high-tech world, that politics are largely driven by geography, and it makes a case go. I think initially making the case going back to the time of Alexander and the Persians and that kind of thing, but now trying to talk about how really, even in modern times, we think that with new kinds of diplomacy, new kinds of warfare, that politics are largely driven by technology, but they're not.
Yeah,
but it's not.
It's really where the water sources are, and so forth, right?
Right. So it's a fun book to read, and it's written by gosh, I think I want to say it's written by Fallows, who writes a lot for the Atlantic Monthly, and this is when he
James Fallows.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's who's writing it.
Right.
I hope I'm not wrong on that.
I'll tell you what I'm reading. I know that our viewers are interested in knowing what I'm reading.
What are you reading, Jim?
Thank you for asking. I'm reading a book called The World's Strongest Librarian by Josh. I can't pronounce his last name, but he is a very interesting guy, 6'7", 6'8", librarian in Salt Lake City, and a longtime sufferer of Tourette's syndrome. And what a fabulously interesting memoir he has written. I mean, I've got about 20 pages left to go, but having grown up a Mormon and is still of that faith, though probably not you know, as intensely as he might have been or his mother might have preferred, but really interesting person who has dealt with a lot in his life, and but with a sweet touch as well, you know. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to have had this opportunity to interview Dr. Tom Hackett. Do you have a closing remark for us?
Just one, and you didn't touch on this, but when I was coming back to the College of Education and exploring my first foray into maybe getting certified to teach in English, the first person I met here was you. And I hope
I was in a good mood.
I tell this story many times. I was walking, looking for the advisor for the secondary English program, and I was standing outside the office. The door was closed. It said Dr. James Brewbaker, and you walked up and you said, "Are you looking for him?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And you said, "I'm him."
Okay,
I've never forgotten.
Well, I've always thought it'd be fun to sit in the back of a room, sort of as a non-entity, and all the people come into the class, and you are really the teacher, only they've never seen you before, and you get to hear what the rumors are. You know, I hear he's a real jerk, or I hear he's a patsy for this, that, and the other. Get him talking about poetry, and then he'll leave you alone for the rest of the day, or something like that.
So it's a good setup,
so
right?
I was, in fact, incognito. I didn't mean to fool you.
Yeah, no, that was. I thought you had such a great sense of humor.
Oh, well,
so,
great. Well,
and it proved to be a terrific association.
Well, I
for
think
that
we've
year,
gotten along pretty well, haven't we? Yeah, right. Well, good. I recall observing you while student teaching with Lisa Brinker at Fort Middle School, or I guess it was Fort Junior High School then.
Yep.
And you were so intense and energetic, and you were doing stuff that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But it was a sort of a canned program that the school system had bought, following a good sales pitch, and you were doing it by cracky, you were doing it, giving it your best. So anyway, we've got a lot of memories. We could probably talk all afternoon.
Yep.
But that said, let me thank all of you for tuning in. We will soon be interviewing Carol S. Taylor, who has written a very interesting book called Chinaberry Summer. And I look forward to a conversation with her about the whole writing process and how do you get published, and who do you think your readers are going to be. So that one will be coming up soon. Later on, we're going to interview one of the guys behind the camera here, Dr. Mike Baltimore, about what's going on with Columbus State Television. And thank you, and see you again soon, I hope.